My sister-in-law looked my 14-year-old daughter dead in the eyes and said, "Your mom is the reason your dad had to carry this family for years. She's always been the weak link." My daughter's face crumpled, just crumpled, like something inside her folded in half, and I watched it happen from across the Thanksgiving table holding a ceramic dish of sweet potato casserole completely frozen. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I set the dish down very carefully, pulled my daughter close, and whispered that we were going to step outside for a minute to get some air. That was the moment everything changed, not just for me, for her. Let me back up. My husband's family has always had a way of making me feel like a guest at a party I wasn't invited to. Not outright cruel. Nothing you could point to and say, "That, right there, that's the problem." It was subtler. The kind of thing that makes you doubt your own memory. A comment here, a look there, a laugh that stops just a little too quickly when you walk into a room. His sister. I'll call her my sister-in-law, because that's what she is, even if the word sits wrong in my mouth. She married into money 3 years ago. Her husband runs a logistics company out of Charlotte. Suddenly, she had opinions about everything: the right neighborhoods, the right schools, the right way to raise children, the right amount of square footage a family our size should have. She started showing up to family events in a different car every season. She started referring to her weekend trips as quick jaunts. She started asking questions that weren't really questions, the kind that are just observations wearing a costume. "Oh, you're still at the same company? That's so loyal of you." "I didn't realize you were renting. I always assumed you owned." "It must be nice not having to worry about keeping up with everything." I let it go. Every time I let it go. Because that's what you do when you want to keep the peace. When you want your kids to have a relationship with their cousins. When you love your husband and you know that asking him to choose is the beginning of the end of something. I let it go for 4 years. And then she said what she said to my daughter at Thanksgiving, and I was done letting things go. Here is what she didn't know about me. Here is what nobody in that family knew, because I never told them, because it was none of their business. When my husband and I got married 8 years ago, we had almost nothing. We were both working entry-level jobs, living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Raleigh, eating a lot of rice and whatever vegetables were on sale. I was working as a bookkeeper for a small manufacturing firm. Not glamorous, not impressive, exactly the kind of job that makes people at dinner parties nod politely and then turn to talk to someone else. But I was paying attention. My boss at that firm, a quiet man in his 60s who had built the business from a single machine in his garage, used to say that the people who actually build wealth are never the ones talking loudest about it. He said wealth is patient. He said it moves slowly and it doesn't need an audience. I thought about that a lot. I started reading, not just bookkeeping manuals, investment strategies, tax law, real estate financing, passive income structures. I read at lunch. I read on weekends. My husband thought I was going through a phase. He'd walk by while I was deep in a spreadsheet and say, "You and your hobby?" in this affectionate way that made me smile even when I wanted to roll my eyes. It wasn't a hobby. When our daughter was 2, we bought our first property, a duplex in a neighborhood that everyone said was up and coming, which is another way of saying it wasn't nice yet, but you could see where it was going. We used almost everything we had for the down payment. I remember standing in that empty unit thinking, this is either the smartest thing we've ever done or we are going to lose everything. We rented both sides within 3 weeks. I kept my mouth shut about it, not because I was embarrassed, because I had learned by watching that the moment you tell people what you have, they start forming opinions about what you should do with it. They start treating it like it's partially theirs. They start giving advice you never asked for and feeling entitled to explanations you don't owe them. So I kept building, quietly, while life went on around me. By the time Thanksgiving rolled around, the one where my sister-in-law decided to explain my worth to my child, We owned 4 properties outright and had equity stakes in 2 small businesses through an LLC my accountant had helped me set up years before. My name wasn't on any of it publicly. Everything ran through the LLC. Everything was clean, documented, and completely invisible to anyone who wasn't looking directly at the paperwork. My husband knew the broad shape of it. He trusted me. He didn't ask questions because I had never given him a reason to. But his family thought I was a bookkeeper who had gotten lucky enough to marry their son. Okay, fine. Let them think that. Back to Thanksgiving. After I took my daughter outside, we sat on the back porch steps and I held her while she cried quietly into my shoulder. She's 14, old enough to feel the sting of something like that, young enough to still want her mom to make it better. Is it true? She asked me. And I could hear in her voice that she wasn't really asking if I was a failure. She was asking if the world worked the way her aunt had just described it, where worth is something other people get to measure, and some people are just born weighing less. No, I said, it's not true. Then why did she say it? I thought about that for a second. Because she doesn't know what she doesn't know, and people like that tend to talk the loudest about things they understand the least. My daughter was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Mom, do you actually have money? I'm Matthew stood in my thing room and told me the base name my house next 7 years old. Yeah, baby, I said. We're okay. She looked at me with this expression I hadn't seen on her face before, like she was recalculating something. Like a whole filing cabinet in her brain was getting reorganized. We went back inside. I was calm. My husband caught my eye from across the room and I gave him the look that meant later and he nodded, because after 8 years he knows all my looks. His sister was in the kitchen helping her husband plate the turkey like she'd done something generous by showing up. She glanced at me when I came back in, and there was something satisfied in her expression, like she'd said her piece and felt better for it. I nephew stood in my room, genuinely, and I went and sat down and ate dinner. Monday morning, my phone rang at 7:43 a.m. It was my accountant. I just got a call from a commercial real estate broker, she said. Someone is trying to lease office space in your Glenwood building. The broker is asking if the LLC is open to a 5-year term. I already knew who it was before she said the name, because the Glenwood building, a 3-story mixed-use property I had quietly purchased 2 years ago through the LLC, was in the same part of town where my sister-in-law's husband had been trying to expand his logistics office for months. My husband had mentioned it at dinner back in September offhand, the way you mention things that have nothing to do with you. Except it had everything to do with me. Tell the broker I'd like to set up a meeting, I said, and please send over the standard disclosure packet. Of course, she said. Should I flag anything particular? No, I said, let it play out naturally. The meeting was scheduled for Wednesday afternoon. My sister-in-law's husband showed up with his operations manager and the leasing consultant. I was already in the conference room when they arrived, me and my accountant and the property manager for the Glenwood building. The moment he saw me, he stopped walking. I watched the math happen on his face, the office he was trying to lease, the LLC name on the door, the woman sitting at the head of the table. Hi, I said. It's good to see you. He recovered quickly. I'll give him that. He sat down. We went through the packet. The terms were standard. The property was in good shape. There was genuinely nothing to object to, which I think made it worse for him, because there was no reason to walk away and he knew it. At the end of the meeting, he shook my hand and said, I didn't know you were in real estate. I'm in a lot of things, I said pleasantly. He signed the letter of intent that Friday. That Sunday, my mother-in-law hosted her usual family dinner. My sister-in-law was quiet in a way she had never been quiet before. She refilled my water glass without being asked. She complimented my daughter's jacket. She laughed at something I said that wasn't even particularly funny. I didn't bring up the building. I didn't bring up the lease. I didn't bring up Thanksgiving. But my daughter was watching all of it with those sharp eyes of hers, And on the drive home, she said, "Something happened, didn't it?" It wasn't a question. "Something happened?" I confirmed. She thought about this. She started, then corrected herself. "Is she going to be different now?" "Probably," I said. "Because of you?" "Because she learned something new," I said, "about how the world works, about how you can't always tell what you're looking at." My daughter nodded slowly. Then, after a long pause, "Mom." "Yeah?" "You're kind of a superhero." I kept my eyes on the road, but I was smiling so hard, my face hurt. "Don't tell anybody," I said. She laughed. This bright, easy laugh, nothing like the crying on the porch steps, and I thought, there it is, that's why. Not to prove anything to my sister-in-law, not to win some invisible competition I never agreed to enter. Not for the look on her husband's face in that conference room, though I won't pretend that wasn't satisfying. For that laugh, for my daughter knowing, really knowing, in the way that sticks, that the people who underestimate you are not the authority on your value. Here's what I want to say to anybody who's watching this and nodding along because you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know what it's like to be in a room full of people who have decided what you are before you opened your mouth. You know what it costs to keep going quietly while someone else takes up all the air with their opinions about your life. Keep going quietly. Not because being quiet is the same as being small, but because the most powerful thing you can do is build something real while other people are busy performing for an audience that isn't paying as close attention as they think. Wealth doesn't care who mocked you at Thanksgiving. Assets don't know your sister-in-law's opinion of your net worth. A lease agreement doesn't ask anyone's permission. My daughter asked me that night on the porch if the world worked the way her aunt described. I told her no. What I should have added, what I'll tell her when she's a little older, is this: the world can be shaped by whoever does the work to understand it, and understanding it takes time and patience and a willingness to learn things that don't impress anyone at dinner until suddenly they do. I still work. I still show up every day to a job that sounds unremarkable to people who care about that sort of thing. I still drive the same car I drove 3 years ago. I still clip coupons for things that are worth clipping. Because none of that was ever the point. The point was the duplex when our daughter was 2. The point was the reading on weekends and the spreadsheets at lunch and the quiet decisions stacking up over years into something that nobody could see coming because I never needed them to see it coming. The point was Wednesday afternoon in a conference room on Glenwood when a man who had never taken me seriously in 8 years of holiday dinners shook my hand and said, "I didn't know you were in real estate." And I smiled and said, "I'm in a lot of things." Because I am, and I always was. He just forgot to ask. I keep thinking about that porch. The way my daughter's shoulders shook. The way she asked me, quietly, like she already half believed the answer might be yes, if what her aunt said was true. That question is the one that stays with me. Not the conference room. Not the lease agreement. Not the look on my brother-in-law's face when he walked in and saw me sitting at the head of that table. The question from my 14-year-old on the back steps is the part I'll carry. Because she wasn't asking about money. She was asking something much harder. Does the world see me the way she sees me, or the way they do? I've thought a lot about what it actually took to get to that Wednesday afternoon meeting. People want to make it about the properties or the LLC or some lucky break, and I understand why, because that's a cleaner story. But the truth is messier and slower and less dramatic. It started with reading things nobody asked me to read. It started with sitting with spreadsheets on a Saturday when I could have been doing something easier. It started with deciding, somewhere in my mid-20s, that I was going to understand how things actually worked. Not just take someone else's word for it. That's not a gift. That's a choice you make over and over again on days when it doesn't feel like it's going anywhere. And the other thing, the part I almost didn't write about, is that I never let bitterness drive it. I'm not going to pretend I wasn't hurt by the years of small comments, the looks, The way I was sorted into a category by people who never asked a single real question about my life. That hurt was real. But I made a decision early on that I wasn't going to let someone else's contempt become the engine of what I built. Because if you build out of spite, you end up needing the contempt to keep going. You become dependent on having an enemy. And I didn't want that. I wanted to build something that would stand whether anyone was watching or not. That's what I want my daughter to understand more than anything. Not the mechanics of a duplex purchase. Not how an LLC works. Those things can be learned in an afternoon. What's harder to learn, and what I hope she absorbed on that porch and in that car ride home, is that integrity isn't about being good when people are looking. It's about being consistent when nobody is. It's about doing the reading, making the decision, keeping the commitment, even when the only person who knows is you. My sister-in-law's husband signed that lease because the building was good and the terms were fair. I didn't inflate anything to make a point. I didn't leverage the situation to embarrass anyone. I showed up to a meeting, did my job, and let the facts be what they were. And my daughter called me a superhero. I'll take that over anything else that happened that week. I'll take that over the conference room, over the signed letter of intent, over all of it, because that's the only kind of winning that actually means something. When the person who knows you best looks at the life you've been quietly building and decides that's the life they want to learn from. She's 14. She's watching everything. And now she knows that the loudest voice in the room is not the most informed one, that patience is not the same as weakness, and that you can build something real without ever asking permission from the people who doubted you. That's enough. That's more than enough.